Welcome to Wealthing Talks. I am your host, Alicia Castillo Holley, bringing you real life conversations from Silicon Valley or somewhere around the world. We will talk about disruptors, angel investments, venture capital, and of course, family offices. Join me along with my children, their families, friends, disruptors, and investors as we explore the fascinating world of creating wealth in a completely different and authentic way. Hi, Ivan. It's such a great pleasure to have you in our podcast. As I mentioned, we had a podcast to bring the humanity to venture capital innovation. I met Ivan several years ago. He is a super angel turned venture capitalist. His approach to business is just magnificent. So I'm just in love with him. And he mentioned in one event at his house that you really fall in love with the founders, and it clicked with me. This is just not just making money, but it's a very, in my view, very spiritual, very emotional business. Ivan, welcome to the podcast. How did you get here?
Well, thank you, Alicia, for the opportunity to chat with you. Well, it's a long story, but let's see if I can boil it down to a minute.
Make
Uh,
it long.
yeah, so I was born in Colombia. We moved to the US when I was very young. So it was my parents and me. So it was a kind of classic American dream. Both of my parents were doctors in Colombia, did not grow up with money, viewed education as the way to move up. And they just thought that there were more opportunities for, frankly, probably for me, moving to the US. And so they moved, and I had an aunt, Tia Gladys, in New Jersey. So we moved to New Jersey. And eventually we ended up in Texas, grew up in Houston for the most part, and made my way across the country. Eventually ended up coming to business school at Stanford. And I remember I arrived for business school, and I think Netscape went public the month before I started business school. So it was like the beginning of the internet. Loved it out here, stayed here. This will be my 30th year in the Bay Area, and just got involved in technology. And about 6 years ago, started angel investing in Latin America, and we can go deeper into why. And then over the last 2 years, launched a small, what I would call proof of concept fund one, to see if I could take the model I'd been doing as an angel and do it more professionally in Latin America. So I'll stop there, and then we can go back and cover whatever ground you want to cover.
Yeah. So many questions. So why Latin America? Why not Texas or California or I don't
Yeah.
know?
Well, I would say two things. One was, as a child, I was always struck by the income disparity between what I would see in Colombia and what I would see growing up in the US, right? And so I remember one time being in Colombia, I was probably 7, 8 years old. I went to my tia Lilia, and I was like, I would talk to her about, like, hey, in Texas the roads are wide and whatever. And I remember one day telling her, I got the solution. In the US, they have this thing called taxes, and it pays for all this stuff. What Colombia needs is more taxes. And she started laughing. She thought that was very funny. She did not agree with me. But anyway, but it was always something that I don't know if bothered was the right word, but I think it bothered me. Like, why were we able to live a certain life and other people weren't? And then fast forward in 1989, I was 19 years old, and we were in Colombia when the leading presidential candidate got shot. And that was a very moving experience. I remember growing up, people talked about Kennedy being shot in the US and people remembering where they were. And I was there, right? And I remember the next day we headed to the airport. The military was lined up on the way to the airport. It was a tragic situation. And the next probably 20 years almost were very difficult in Colombia. And so that was a moving experience for me. And so I knew at that point I wanted to do something to help Colombia. So I came home, and both my parents are doctors. Of course, I was supposed to be a doctor. I did pre-med. I told my mom, I said, Mommy, I'll finish my pre-med requirements, but I want to learn something that maybe someday I can help Columbia. So I was at Harvard. I did development economics. I met one of the future presidents of Columbia in a seminar there. He was at the Kennedy School. And then I tried to do something. I worked at McKinsey, ended up going to Mexico. But the violence in general in Latin America was very high in the early 90s. Even in Mexico, they were starting to have kidnappings of executives and stuff like that. And so I just thought my window of opportunity had shut. And then fast forward basically 20 years, I had some money. I'd been thinking about being an angel. But at the time, it was 2015, 2016, there was just nothing going on in the Bay Area that was super inspiring. I didn't feel very differentiated. I'd be one of a thousands. Yeah, they didn't really need my help. And I did two trips to Colombia, and the trip in 2018 was pivotal. And I'm like, you know what? I think this ecosystem might be ready now. Maybe I can help. And so just one thing led to another, and I got involved. So, but that was kind of the backstory as to why I'm so motivated and passionate for what I do.
And thank you. And then from 2018 to now, how has the path been? What have you learned? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What can other people learn from your experiences?
Yeah, so as an angel, I invested in about 30 companies, mostly in Spanish-speaking Latin America. And then with the fund, I've invested in 13 companies. And what I would say is for me, and maybe this is, partly this kind of how I think of as an investor, people always ask me, is it is it the founder? It must be all about the founder and all this stuff. And for me, I really think about it first from what is the problem that they're solving, right? And for better for worse, there are a lot of big problems to solve in Latin America. But if you don't have an urgent big problem, it's very hard to build a meaningful and sustainable business, regardless of who the team is. It just doesn't matter. I've seen it as an operator, great team pointed in the wrong direction. People love to talk about pivots and all that, and for sure they happen, but there's a lot of survivorship bias in startup land. We hear about these incredible stories where somebody turned around. We don't hear about the other 999 that didn't make it, right? And so for me, I start with what is the problem? And then the other big thing is why now, right? Is there an inflection point either in the market? Is there an inflection point in this company's history, right? And then the other thing I would say is that for me, what I've seen in Latin America, and my guess is this might be true in the US, maybe not, but it's a game about selection. I'm convinced any really, I don't want to say any, but very motivated founders are going to knock on every door. There is a lack of capital in Latin America. So my assumption is everybody sees everything, right? And so I have to see something different than other people. And so part of my approach is super hands-on. So I joke that I have a freemium model. I will oftentimes work with founders up to 3 months. My longest ever was 5 months before I invest. And I feel this is an opportunity for most importantly, for the founder to see if I add any value, right? But
Yeah.
for me, obviously, to get conviction on what's the problem they're solving, get conviction on the founders, and see if we connect, right? So I think it's a lot of it is about selection. And this is a hard business. This is not easy. It sounds glamorous. It is not. And I'm excited to roll up my sleeves and work with these founders. So.
Wow, it's so many drops of wisdoms here. You took me back to Chile, where I lived in Chile 7 years. I did the first seed capital fund there. And one of the things that we realized is that we needed to work with the companies for around 4 months before we decided to invest. And we did all of that for free, and we could afford to do all of that, but not everybody could. But then in the process, you build a tribe. And I think the tribe is really important to support each other and to continue growing the companies. Have you built a tribe? How are you going to build that? Have you thought about that?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I would say that another part of my way of investing is I'm very network driven, right? And there's a lot of reasons that what I'm doing now, we'll see if it works. Hopefully, in the long run, we'll find out. But I think the reason that I've had the traction that I've had is frankly, things like WhatsApp didn't exist, years ago. Zoom calls, the pandemic, right? The being able to have a meeting like we're having, right? And the other thing is that the ecosystem is small. So I don't know if you can hear. We may have to cut that. Can you hear my cat?
It doesn't matter. Cats are
Okay.
welcome. You might hear my grandkids because today's my birthday. So
Happy birthday, Alicia.
thank you.
Um, but anyway, so I think if you do good work, word spreads quickly,
Yeah.
and especially with WhatsApp. And so for me, it's I want to make every founder, particularly if I invest, but even if I don't, I want to make it a very special experience for them. And then I've gotten very involved in the ecosystem on many levels, and so. I know a lot of people now there. They know me, and so I think I have a tribe. You'd have to ask people who work with me whether there's a tribe, but yeah, I have a lot of folks that I interact with every day on WhatsApp and in person as much as I can.
I don't know if you have a tribe, but you do have a fan club. I'm a member, so yes, yes, and that's why you're here. So let's switch to the hard lessons. Any hard lesson that you've had that you say, "Oh, I wish I had known these," so somebody else might not repeat that.
Yeah, I would say. A couple things, maybe more as an investor and then more as I don't know, observer of humanity, right? Um, there are a lot of businesses that look great on paper and it just make logical sense. Like, why shouldn't this exist? I will refer to them with an expression well, I don't know how common I use it here, motherhood and apple pie businesses, right? Like, nobody's gonna, everybody loves motherhood and apple pie, right? But a lot of times I just push for, let's just go through one use case, one example. Why is a customer, people don't like change. They've figured out how they live their life, whether it's a business or a consumer. And so for somebody to change their behavior for something you've built, it's a big deal. So why? I just go super deep on the why. And there were some businesses probably that I invested in as an angel that I would argue were look great on paper, and we lived through a boom period where those things got marked up because the founder looked great on paper, the business looked great on paper, and some of those things in the long run wash out if there isn't something really there and there isn't something urgent. And so that's super important to me. Go ahead.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. With AI, there is a lot of fuss about using AI to evaluate decks and to evaluate deals. We get bombarded by that at our club and our fund. We've explored using 3 of them. We're developing one. And I said, you know what, you can't replace due diligence. You have to meet the people. You have to dive deep into the rationale, the business plans, and how people think. Because at the end, people are not machines, people are people. What do you think about AI and the impact on evaluating businesses? What are your thoughts about that?
I think it depends on what stage you invest in, right? I think if you're a later stage, there's probably, some people will refer to it as like investing in a spreadsheet, right? So at some point, the metrics become a very dominant part, maybe not the whole thing, but so I could imagine where there's more data, it probably helps a lot, or it could help a lot. Depends. If you get 1,000 pitch decks a day, it's probably going to help you a little bit, at least to sort. And I think even at the early stage, probably some sorting. There may be some things, there's some signal, but maybe it helps you prioritize, right? Or eliminate some stuff but for me, I would never, at the early stage, it's very difficult, right? To automate that.
Yeah, even at the later stage, because we invest across stages, and garbage in, garbage out. You can put any information there, but
I would say the other thing that I've learned, and this was a hard lesson, um, is trust. It's a combination of trusting your gut and also realizing how important the role of the CEO is, right? And so one time, only once, I made an investment where I underwrote the entire team, where I was like, well, I had some concerns about the CEO, but they had some positive attributes, but there were some things that I didn't like. But I thought that the other founders would complement that individual. And so, there was early traction, and so there were reasons to do it. But there was something about it that I was like, I don't know. And it turned out that no, the CEO is by far at the earliest stages. Obviously there are exceptions. You need a technical found all this stuff, right? But the CEO drives the day-to-day priorities. So if you as an investor are worried that they're a little bit all over the place or that that you've got any issues, in my mind, it's like, I've learned that lesson the hard way, right? Doesn't matter what traction is, whatever. They may prove you wrong. Congratulations, good luck, but life's too short. Yeah. So I would say that was a hard lesson as an investor.
mm. And what have been the surprising successes that you said, "Oh, I got this right. I knew it." Have you had one of those?
Well, I mean, there's some companies that are doing very well. The journey is, still early, so who knows whether it's a success or not. But no, I mean, there's two incredible stories. One is I invested in a 20-year-old founder in Mexico City, and he was literally just WhatsApping me just a second ago. He's 23 now, so he's an old man. And I remember in the first 2 to 5 minutes of the meeting, I said something is very different about this person. Um, he hadn't gone to college, but he spoke so clearly. So for me, one of the biggest things I look for is the clarity of thought, right? It doesn't mean that I have to agree with what they're saying, but my benchmark is I got to be able to explain it to my 81-year-old father. If I can't, then shame on me because I can't synthesize, but also shame on the founder. It's like it's just too complicated, right? So simplicity is very important to me. And this is a 20-year-old who talked like a 40-year-old. And I really believed in his business. I made him the offer to work with me for the next 3 months. Every Friday we would meet because he said he was going to launch in February. So this is pre-launch company. By the time we got to March, this was 2022, I remember thinking, I think I found the Mexican Bill Gates. Like literally every meeting, he blew me away. And I know what a 20-year-old thinks like. And I remember what I was like at 20. And he's going to close on 30 million in revenue this month, 3 years after launch. He has raised 25 million in equity, $75 million debt facility, and he's never been to college. And he's unbelievable. We've had 3 board meetings, and they're top 1% board meetings. So sometimes you just get lucky. You get conviction on the business, you get conviction on the individual, and you're a small part of somebody else's hero's journey. That's what I love to be. So that one's awesome.
You didn't pass on the opportunity.
No, and nobody else did it. This is where I go back to everybody sees everything. I was told I was crazy by a very senior investor in Latin America for doing this. Um, and uh, and he's Mexican. Almost no money came from Mexico. Almost all of it came from the US and some from Brazil. Um, so
So, do you think founders and investors should cross boundaries? Is that the way? Is that a way? Or what is a way for a Latin American? Because I left Latin America. I have a different journey than yours. My parents were both educators. My dad was a professor. My mom was a teacher. I was a professor. So I believe in education. So we have some similar backgrounds there. but I left because there was no opportunities for me, probably like your parents.
Hmm.
But I went back, built some opportunities in another country. I went back to the US. I left several times, but I see a change now. How do people breach that I don't know, border? I don't mean to
Sure.
politicize, but how do people reach those potential investors that give more than money? Because I think it's more than money that we bring to the table,
Yeah.
especially in the early stage.
I think in the case of, I'll just go back to that example. The company's called One Car Now or OCN, and the founder is Maidon. I think one of the things that people have told me since I was an angel was I said that my approach is very different to other investors in Latin America. And one of them said, Latin America has got many positive things, and this is probably not that different than the US, so maybe it's the same here, but it's a very class-driven society. It's very hierarchical. And so if you have a certain profile, I call it central casting. You went to school in the US, you speak good English, and you can sell. Then, and on top of that, you go to the right club, and better yet, your parents know somebody else's parents, right? Then you get some, you get some opportunity, right? If you don't have any of those things, good luck, right? It's not to say it's impossible, but it's hard, right? Whereas I grew up professionally here in the Bay Area, and it's super competitive, right?
Mhm.
And so, you have, not all the investors are great, but I would say it's a very competitive environment here. So if you're building something very interesting, I don't care if you're 20 years old or you're 50 years old, you're going to have people competing to support you if they believe in what you're building, right? And so I think that's part of my differentiation is because I take the time, then I'm able to get conviction where others do not because they don't get past the first meeting. They probably don't even get a meeting. They get screened out, right?
Yeah,
And so I think that's a big thing. There's bias. It's bias in a different way, but there's definitely bias. And then what I would say is, despite everything that's going on in the world today with this new administration, I think it's inevitable that the world is getting more integrated. Um, and uh, and so I believe there's going to be a lot more investment from the US into Latin America. The other story, which we'll talk about a little bit, of company in Venezuela that I invested in and backed, and it's been extraordinary. They've been here for 2 weeks meeting with 30 investors, the absolute top investors. It's surreal to have dinner with them a couple of days ago and talk about, meetings with Andreessen, with Ribbit Capital, with just literally the top fintechs. And they've got offers to invest in a country that is a pariah, globally, but also a pariah politically here in the US, right? And it just shows you that, there's amazing people building amazing things. They will attract supporters. So,
that is correct. That is absolutely correct. What is next for your fund for Nimundo?
yeah, so I'm in the third year of Fund One. So, most importantly, I got to go find my priority is number one, find outlier founders and companies. So I got to
Yeah.
find five more to finish out the fund. Second, I will definitely be raising a fund two. Hopefully, it'll be much bigger so I can support these founders in a much bigger way. And third, just do a lot more with the ecosystem, both in LATAM but also in the US. One of the neat things that's been happening is with the advancement of AI. I tell people San Francisco's back. And I'm like the welcome wagon for all these Latin American founders. They're like, Ivan, you got to meet so and so, whatever. And two of my most recent investments have been Latin American founders that have moved to the US, and building some super interesting things, building global from the start. But in some cases, the CEOs feel that it helps the business for them to be here in the US. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. And so my guess is for the remainder of this fund, but probably for fund two, my guess is going to be 30 to 40% US base, but some direct tie to Latin America. So whether the founder is Latin American, or they're building for LATAM, or they're building a global company that also hits LATAM issues that I care about in LATAM.
Talk to us about the industries.
Yeah.
Industries are you focusing on?
So I'm a solo GP, and so I have to kind of pick my battles, mostly so that I can help the founders, right? I'm sure I could have a reasonably intelligent conversation with a lot of different companies, but my network and helping them raise capital, helping them with their business, it benefits from some degree of focus. So I picked the three markets that had huge problems in Latin America. So there's fintech, right? Everything about fintech, from credit, whether you're on the consumer side, on the business side, a bunch of issues that still remain to be solved. The other one is property tech and construction tech. There's massive housing gaps, housing crisis everywhere. And then even with on the industrial side, with things like nearshoring, having to build factories, having to build roads, right? So anything to make that easier. And then supply chain, right? Again, despite all the stuff going on right now, we got to move goods back and forth, whether it's within the countries, across the countries, across borders, right? And so those are the three areas. I would say the fourth one has been AI. Then that's been more organic. Mostly, I focus on ones where they cross over with the industries that I'm in. But I've made one investment in this founder that's unbelievable. He's got incredible traction, and it's a little bit out of thesis. But that was one where I worked with the founder for almost 2 years. And I'm like, okay, I gotta find a way to work with this person because they're incredible. But so I would say AI is probably a big one. For fund two, I don't know. We might add healthcare. I was just picking
There,
what are the
I'm there.
biggest areas of problem? That's probably a big one too. So.
Yeah, yeah. Healthcare is my bread and butter, but yeah. Ivan, I have one last question for you, which is probably the most important question that I ask, and I don't ask that question before the podcast. I was in coma when I was 13. I was dead and I came back, and then I decided to spend my life thinking, who am I when I'm not here in time and space? Have you thought about that question? And if you haven't, who are you when you're not here in time and space?
So make sure I understand the question. Are you asking like what's it going to be like when I'm gone? Do I think about that, or is the question something different?
The question is about your essence. You don't have to. Uh, there's a lot of people that are going to listen to this podcast.
Uh-huh.
They're not going to meet you personally.
Yeah.
So you transcend. The question is about transcendence, but it's
Okay.
about who are you when you're
I
not
think I've
here.
got an answer. I think I've got an
I
answer.
got it. Of course. Yeah. Go ahead.
So look, I'm really sorry that you went through the experience that you went through. But at the end of the day, we all go through some tough experiences, right? And we've had some challenges with health with our family, and there's some hard things that we all go through. And one time I went through a very difficult time in 2001. And what came out of that experience, so I'll just be super candid. I was depressed because a bunch of different things happened. In 2001, it was like everything that could go wrong in a year, other than COVID went wrong in 2001. You had 9/11, you had the stock market, I was at a telecom company and went bankrupt. I mean, just a lot of stuff. Um, but something my wife started and has continued on, and I guess I would say it's the essence, right? It's do the things that give you energy, period. Do the things that give you energy, and you'll be fine, right? So the things that give me energy, they're very specific. Exercise, working out, spending time with friends, um, working on things that I'm curious about, right? And spending time with my family and especially my wife, right? So those are the four things. So today, I went on a run on the Stanford campus with six of my friends. We've had this running group for over 20 years. And we had coffee at Pete's, and three other people who we knew who happened to be at that Pete's across from Stanford in Town and Country joined us, right? And so it was a combination of spending time with friends and working out, right? Today, I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. I've talked with three of the founders today. One guy calls me from Miami. Ivan, do you have time to talk? Right? That gives me tremendous energy. And then, I'm very curious about what I do. So I've read like all these newsletters. Friday is my learning day, so I do that, and I help get my son out of the house to go on a trip to China. Right? So I just do the stuff that gives you energy each day, and it'll all work out. Right? Things will be up, things will be down, but I'm good.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Ivan, for your words of wisdom, sharing your experience. We will share your name and your contact details in the podcast. Thank you for being with us. Yours in Wealthy.
Thank you, Alicia. Happy to be here.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ivan Montoya. We have so many things in common. I grew up in Venezuela. He grew up in Colombia. I feel more like a mother to him. Also, I'm much older too. But the one thing that I really like about him is his attention to detail. And I hope that you get from this conversation that success is not a matter of luck. It's a matter of hard work and having attention to details so you can continue your progress. Ivan has his first fund, Numundo, and he's launching a second fund. I really like his approach. We share a lot of deals with him, and he's very thorough into what he invests in because he only invests in things that he can support. And that is the way that best VCs work, especially in early stages. Thank you for listening, and you're seeing Wealthy, Alicia Castillo Holley. Thanks for tuning in to our Wealthy Talks. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. To stay connected, visit us at wealthing.com. This is Alicia Castillo Holley, your host, and until next time, yours in Wealthing.